Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're really excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. And we have Chris Johnson and Dr. Ancilleno Davis joining us. And I will introduce them in a couple minutes, but just a little bit of introduction before we get started and a couple of announcements. So in case you're not too familiar with us, I think we have a few new people that are tuning in. We are BirdsCaribbean. We are a regional nonprofit that's dedicated to conserving birds and nature throughout all the islands of the West Indies or the Caribbean. And we work with all kinds of partners in all the islands, governments, NGOs, schools, university, teachers, volunteers, tour companies. And our big mission is building capacity and raising awareness and promoting science and getting people excited about birds and birding and using that as a platform to bring about positive conservation actions and habitat conservation of birds throughout all the islands. So if you're new to us, we hope you'll check us out and start to follow us. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. And we're just wrapping up our Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival. For the last couple of months, we've been celebrating all the endemics that are in the islands. There are actually 171 birds that are found only in the Caribbean islands, which is phenomenal. In the islands, you can go and see unique species on each island. So we've been educating about those species for the whole last couple of months. We've been celebrating with Endemic Bird of the Day. Last year we did 50 species and this year we did 30 new ones. So on our website you'll find feathery facts about these birds, coloring pages for kids, activity sheets for kids, videos, bird calls, songs, puzzles, all kinds of really great things. And part of our Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival has been these weekly webinars. And this was our last one of the season. We will be having more webinars in the future, but we've been doing these weekly ones every week. So we're excited to have Chris and Leno for our last webinar of the CEBF series. And if you've been following us and learning about your Caribbean endemic birds, one of our educators has put together a two-part quiz, which will test your knowledge on Caribbean birds. So we encourage you to go to our website and take the quiz. It's really fun. You'll learn a lot doing it, and you'll be able to see how much you know about Caribbean birds from the last couple of months. And another thing that we're doing as part of the theme is Sing, Fly, Soar Like a Bird this year, is we're collecting videos from all of our friends and colleagues from around the islands. So we'd love to hear from you, just a couple of sentences, up to a minute max, saying, what does this theme mean to you? And we did have a deadline of May 31st, but we are still accepting videos. If you want to make a short video and just send it in to us, that would be awesome. And just go to that bit.ly link, Sing, Fly, Soar video, and you can read more about it. And we would welcome more videos, and we'll be sharing those on our social media shortly. And then one more last announcement. Tomorrow there is a webinar called Modus Fest, and it actually goes on from noon tomorrow to 3 p.m. And it's about Modus, which is a wildlife tracking system that's really catching on and developing throughout the Western Hemisphere. And there's quite a few stations that are set up in the US and Canada and in parts of Central America and South America. Just a few stations have been put up in the Caribbean so far, but none of them are active right at this moment. And so BirdsCaribbean will be giving a short presentation during this Modus Fest. We're actually talking at about 2:20 p.m. So we'll be talking about our plans for Caribbean Modus. We just got a new grant to help develop Modus in the Caribbean, and we have an article about this on our website. So we invite you to learn more about this exciting wildlife tracking system and see how you can get involved. So please make note of that and join us if you can tomorrow afternoon. And so thank you again for joining us. We hope you'll stay in touch. If you don't already get our monthly newsletter, please sign up on our website and then also follow us on social media. So again, today we welcome Chris and Leno to this webinar. We're really excited to have both of them. Chris Johnson will start out the presentation. And Chris is a 19-year-old birder. He's a wildlife photographer and conservationist from the Bahamas. He's recorded over 258 species of birds in the Bahamas and assisted in the founding of the Bird Club of Abaco. He has a really strong passion for conservation and avian research in the Bahamas. He's attended numerous birding events such as the Cornell Young Birders Camp and participated in many international birding events like Global Big Day. And he runs his own bird-oriented social media account called Bahama Birder. And you must follow him if you don't already. So look for him on Instagram and Facebook. So he'll be starting off the talk, and about halfway through, Dr. Ancilleno Davis will take over the presentation. And Dr. Davis, or Lino as we like to call him, he's a Bahamian ecologist focusing on science capacity building and community education in the Bahamas. He has served on BirdsCaribbean Board of Directors for many years and is now co-chair of our BirdsCaribbean Mentorship Committee. And Lino also serves on various national committees related to conservation in the Bahamas. And he runs and owns the Science and Perspective brand. And I encourage you to follow him as well on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And he has a blog as well. So welcome to Chris and Lino. And I will stop sharing and turn it over to you, Chris. So welcome, everybody. Oh, we're not hearing you yet.
On mute. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Let's see. There we are. So welcome, everybody. This is a Global Big Day on Abaco by myself, Chris Johnson, and Dr. Ancilleno Davis.
Hello, everyone.
So like Lisa had mentioned a little bit earlier, I am Chris Johnson. I'm a 19-year-old Bahamian wildlife enthusiast, conservationist, primarily just dealing with birds. I really love birds, and they've been a big passion of mine for many years.
And I am Dr. Ancilleno Davis, and I run the Science and Perspective brand on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as on my website, scienceandperspective.com. You can find me at Sci Perspective on any of those, or just if you can spell my name correctly, you can find me all over the internet. And I just want to welcome everyone, and thanks to all the BirdsCaribbean supporters and the people who are interested in conserving and protecting the birds of Abaco in the Bahamas. So firstly, we're talking about Avaco Island, and where is Avaco Island? Abaco Island is actually the northernmost island in the Bahamas, and although it's kind of east and south of Grand Bahama, a part of it actually does stick up north of Grand Bahama. But Abaco Island is important because it is part of the beginning of that migratory pathway that brings birds down from North America through the Caribbean and sometimes into South America. But Abaco is also important because it is one of our pine islands. And in the Bahamas, we only have 4 pine islands, which are Abaco, Grand Bahama, Andros, and New Providence. But that means that there is that one particular habitat that's on Abaco that's not found south of Abaco in the Bahamas. And some of these this diversity and the proximity to North America, as well as just the convenience of coming to Abaco, makes it a major economic center for the Bahamas, as well as a really big birding hotspot. So Abaco is one of the islands that we found the most diverse, the most different species of birds in the Bahamas. And what is Global Big Day? For those of you that don't know what Global Big Day in birding is, Global Big Day actually started in 1985 with the Cornell Labs team Sapsucker. And basically they would go around New York and try to see as many birds as they could. And they did that for quite a while until in 2015, they said, hey, let's make this a worldwide thing. And they started inviting people to participate along with the work that they were doing at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And since then, Global Big Day has really just grown to amazing proportions. This year, on the 8th of May, more than 51,000 people around the world in 192 countries celebrated birds. And we all together broke 4 world records. So globally, we set records for the greatest number of bird watchers or birders from the most countries, reporting more species and collecting more checklists than ever before in a single day of birding. So that's pretty epic. And in the Bahamas, we definitely support the use of eBird, and any of you can sign up for eBird online, and you can get it on your phone, and you can download the companion app Merlin Bird ID, so you can know what birds you're looking at and then record them so that we can keep a track of what's going on with the birds around us. And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology takes care of that data. And BirdsCaribbean has done a lot to support training birders to identify birds, to do monitoring and survey work. And they've also contributed a lot to giving supplies and resources to birders and ornithologists and students and researchers throughout the Caribbean over the years and decades, really. So thank you very much. Now, why is it so important to go and see how many birds there are on any given day? Well, part of it is if everyone does it at the same time, we kind of get an idea of where all the birds are at that instant. And that's really cool so that you can get this idea of distribution. But for Abaco in particular, Abaco got hit really hard by Hurricane Dorian in 2019. And so parts of Abaco were really devastated, as you see from these slides. That it didn't just destroy the human habitat, houses and stuff like that. It also wiped out a lot of pine forest. So these pines are, they're fire evolved or fire adapted, but they're not used to having, 10 feet of seawater inside the forest. And so when these pine forests die, that can change significantly the way that birds can use them. Again, like I said, it's part of the migratory pathway. And because it's right up north, the last step before you get back into North America, these birds that are relying on these resources before they get home and try to reproduce, if that habitat is significantly changed or a lot of those resources aren't there, this could impact the reproduction of those birds when they get back to their native climate. And on Avaco, we actually, in the past, we had lots of really great power birders who contributed so much information to the bird record there. But now those birders, many of them had to leave Abaco because their homes and their communities were devastated by Hurricane Dorian. So this year, Chris and I, we happened to be on Avaco Island at the same time. And we said, hey, let's put together a global big day group. And this presentation is about how we pulled it off. So why was it so difficult? And this is one of the challenges of living in an archipelagic nation. Our islands are separated by ocean, although it's connected by ocean in some ways. This logistic difference where you can't drive down from, North Carolina to South Carolina, you have to take a boat or plane 2 days, and you have to get that COVID test in your nose and all this stuff. So finding people that were on Abaco that could easily get there was a challenge. Also, Abaco Island is long, and growing up in the Bahamas, I grew up on New Providence Island, 21/7. So, just 21 miles by 7 miles. Abaco is 130 miles long. So that's like 2 hours from south to north. And so that definitely is a logistic issue when you have very few people to cover the ground. And there were a few birders who had experience to identify the birds or understood how to coordinate a global big day. So that was all very interesting. And then we have the issue with the actual damage left over from Hurricane Dorian. And yes, it's a year and a half later, but there are still downed trees. Lots of the areas that we wanted to go into, we couldn't get past. Some of the habitat was just gone. So where you would say, oh, let's go here and look at some pine forest species, we couldn't do that anymore because there just wasn't any pine forest. And then there were just the lack of the bird watchers. I think that was really the biggest thing. If you see any of our our famous birders like Woody and Craig Lehman, like send them a shout out from Avaco. We definitely miss them on Global Big Day. And the last thing is the forest fires. So because Hurricane Dorian killed a whole bunch of these pine trees, it's basically just firewood sitting there now. And this is causing lots of really destructive forest fires in Abaco, where the living pine trees can resist the forest fire. These downed pine trees, they are really just a bunch of tinder in the forest. And so we're going to be struggling with that for a little while now. So really think about that as we come into this new fire season this year as well.
So like Lino mentioned, Global Big Day on Abaco definitely was very difficult to put together in terms of the Abaco chain being so long. But also we wanted to target a few of Abaco's native bird species. Abaco has diverse birding activity from endemic species such as the Bahama swallow in the top left here, the Bahama Warbler on the bottom right here, the Bahama yellowthroat, and even though it's no longer considered a true Bahamian endemic, the archipelagic endemic, the Bahama woodstar. But it's not just endemics. We also have tons of specialty species. We have birds like this West Indian woodpecker, which the subspecies is only found on Abaco and extreme East Grand Bahama. I believe it's Melanerpes superciliaris blakei. It's only found in these two areas. So it was a priority for us to get this off the list, as well as species like this Bahama parrot, or more exclusively the Abaco parrot. This species is one of the only parrots in North America that nest underground. So it was very important for us to get this off the list. And then we have range restricted species like this olive-capped warbler that can only be found on 2 islands in the Bahamas. And they were actually hit the hardest by Dorian, Grand Bahama and Abaco. And they're also confined to pine forests on Cuba. So it's very important to understand what these species are doing and how they're doing. But it's not just diversity of birds that are native. We also have tons of migrants that come through. We have 3 types of migratory birds. So we have the winter residents like this gray-capped bird, the northern pintail, and the black and white warbler that come down for the whole winter, and then they return back to North America to breed, and they just repeat that cycle. We also have these 3, which are transient migrants, which means that they only pass through the Bahamas as a small blip on their map in their long route that they take. So we have species like this wood thrush that's going to be somewhere in Central or South America for the winter. We have the purple gallinule and the Franklin's gull. But the Bahamas and the Caribbean, for that matter, is very important and special that we have summer migrants. We have species that come up from South America to breed here, like this gray kingbird, or these least terns, or the black and white warbler.
So how did we actually manage to pull off this Global Big Day? Firstly, we got a really spectacular team together, and we had some awesome team members. And these included not just people from Abaco, but people that were visiting, and we got the benefit of coming right on the tail end of the Bahamas National Trust bird guide training. And so these birders were trained in not only in knowing how to identify the species, but in sharing that with others. Sorry about that. With being able to share their enthusiasm for birds with other people. And then we also had incredible organizations that contributed to our work. So especially we have BirdsCaribbean that donated binoculars, scopes, field guides, and we use them throughout North and South Avaco. But we also had the support of Abaco Neem Farm, as well as the Abaco Big Bird Chicken Farm, where they were welcoming to allow us onto their properties to see some really cool species. So now, how did we split up the teams? We took the teams into north locations and south locations. And like I said, Abaco is very long. And so we actually started at the Neem Farm, which is basically just below where Hurricane Dorian leveled up. And when Hurricane Dorian leveled up, basically everything above the Neem Farm, the pine forests were devastated and the communities were hit really hard. But we got to see places like the dumps at Marsh Harbor and Treasure Key, that a dump is still a dump site. And a lot of those birds that go there still got the same benefits from them. But then we also had in the north, we had places like Robert's Nursery, where we could barely get in there because there were so many downed trees. And then the Sunset Ridge area that used to be lush mangrove wetland, after they got kind of smothered by that saltwater intrusion, that has really changed over the years. And we have great data from the past at places like Stink Pond, but now they're just not the same anymore. And at the same time, we got to visit places like the Valley, which is a restaurant in North Avaco, but the shorebirds and seabirds, the gulls and terns, they were out en masse. They really showed up and showed out for us. So it was really interesting. And Chris led the South team.
Yeah, so like Lena was saying, it was super important for the North teams to cover those decimated areas by Dorian, but it was just as equally important for the South team to do their job as well, and survey some of these areas that weren't as affected as badly from Hurricane Dorian, just to see how bird populations are doing and if these birds have some sense of normalcy after Dorian, if they're getting back to where they were before Dorian.
And so again, with our South highlights, with our North highlights, we definitely had the Marsh Harbor dumps and the areas around there. You can see the pine cones on the left. This was areas that you could walk for meters and meters, and there's just dead pine cones on the ground. And this really represents all of these, baby pine cones and seeds that will never germinate. And so that means that pine forest is going to take a much longer time to recover. Then you see the downed pine trees. Those, not only was it loss of habitat, but it also prevented us from getting in to see what the actual impact was on the birds, because we couldn't climb over and duck under every pine tree that was there. And some places it was just impossible. But then also the homes and the structures, they not only represent the loss of, human support, so there were not as many birders on Abaco, but we also didn't have places that we could stop, to get a drink, to use a restroom, to ask for directions. And also a lot of the debris from Hurricane Dorian, from those damaged buildings and stuff, they were in the forest and in the areas that we were looking into. Sunset Ridge was, you can see the history of the beauty of that site. You can kind of feel that it must have been amazing in the past. But when we looked out over there, it was not green, lush mangrove forest. It was really gray as far as the eyes could see. And there weren't any leaves on anything. And it was just really interesting. And then things like the bald eagle that Dr. Bracy saw on numerous occasions, we definitely did not see on that day. But we did still go there. And that's one of the important things about Global Big Day, is trying to get to these sites where you have the chance of maybe seeing these really cool species, although you're not sure if you will. And these are some of the species that have been reported there, Treasure Key and Sunset Ridge in the past, radish egrets, tricolored herons, and American white pelicans. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see them this time. And here in Treasure Key, we were allowed into Treasure Key by the owners, and so we're definitely grateful to them for allowing us that opportunity. But yes, Treasure Key got hit pretty hard by Hurricane Dorian, and this affects the maintenance of the site. They have a really good golf course there, but of course, since there's no one using the golf course and may not use it for a while, the maintenance regime, the water availability and stuff on site can change. But on that golf course, the cool thing is that we did still get to see our red-tailed hawk and least grebe. And in the area, we did see least sandpipers inside the dump area. And inside that dump, I think the dump was actually the most special site for me on Global Big Day. I just really love how the birds that you see there, they just see it as habitat, and they're walking around and they're drinking in these like puddles that we would definitely balk at. And there is the vultures, and when you get to see a vulture up close picking through the garbage, but it's the biggest thing in the dump and it just looks like dump royalty. I think that's always pretty cool for me, but maybe I'm a bird geek. But we also saw all these little least sandpipers and semi-palmated plovers and laughing gulls. They were even mating in the middle of the dump, and you're like, wow, this place is really special for them. But it also speaks to the fact that it's still consistent. So even after Hurricane Dorian, the dump is still in the same place, and it pretty much still looks the same. 2 birds. This other site that we went to, the Cooperstown site, is the main site where we saw the greater black-backed gulls, lesser black-backed gulls, herring gulls and stuff are seen there as well. But I think it was, again, it's one of my favorites to go out on the coastlines, and you can see how these birds are hanging out and just using the resources that we leave for them. Especially like the cormorants and the royal terns, they sit out on the dock pilings, and to them, it doesn't matter that this dock was destroyed. Those pilings are still standing there, and that's what the cormorants are sitting on, and there are just so many of them out there. No one's walking out onto the dock anymore, so they pretty much own that area.
So Lino and the guys up north did a really great job with going to these 10 different locations and finding diversity, even in the wake of Dorian. But I'd like to think that we did pretty well for ourselves down south. We had just about 10 locations visited as well. And we had a little bit of a larger group. We had 5 members, whereas North had 3. But the diversity that we were able to capture within South Abaco was quite extraordinary. Our first stop of the day took us to Casuarina Point, and this large expanse of ocean tidal flats proved pretty successful. We were able to use a spotting scope that was donated by BirdsCaribbean to ID a few terns that were on a small rocky key offshore about a quarter of a mile away, and we were able to ID roseate terns, least terns, bridal terns, sooty terns, and brown naughties. And that was really, really special for all of us. And I think we're going to remember that for the rest of our lives for sure. But Casuarina is also important in that it has a Indian peafowl feral population of them, actually. So the story behind these guys is they were imported in the 1990s into a bone fishing lodge in Casuarina Point. And the population just skyrocketed after the bone fishing lodge took a dive after a hurricane. But these Indian peafowls are still there to tell the story, and they are a feral population. Our second stop of the day took us to Gilpin Point, and one of our main target species here was the white-cheeked pintail. This duck is it's found there most times. It is a resident population down at Gilpin Point. And we knew if we went to Gilpin Point, we would have a high chance or a high likelihood of finding these ducks. And I was able to capture this shot of a white-cheeked pintail waiting on the water. We also were greeted by a few of the Abaco specialty birds like the Bahama Parrots and the West Indian woodpeckers. And to see 50 parrots fly over your head, there's no other feeling like it. So it was great that we were able to get these important species off of our list. We were also able to go to Abaco National Park, and the amount of bird diversity inside the park is insane. We were able to get most of our endemic species in the park, including this Bahama Warbler. But the national park hosts all 4 of the endemic bird species of Abaco, and we're able to find all of them there. The park is just over 20,000 acres, and it has diverse ecosystems ranging from rocky shores to mangroves to pine forest to coppice forest. So if you have the chance to go down to the park, you're definitely going to find something worth your while.
So one of the interesting things is that when you do a global big day, no matter what area you're in, some species are kind of ubiquitous and you find them everywhere. And some species you only find at this site or you find it at a different site. And when we went on our global big day adventure, up north, we found 32 species, but only 4 of them were unique to the northern sites. And we visited 10 locations. Now, Chris, those in the south, they got 81 species. So kudos to Chris those. And next time I'm gonna take the south side. But they got 78 unique species. So this pie chart just briefly summarizes the species diversity that we found. We found 53 species that were only found in South Abaco on that day, and 28 species that were found both in North and South Abaco. And like I said before, there were 4 species that we only found in Northern Abaco with our northern team.
Now, the slide that we've all been wanting to get to. If you have gone out on some global big days, you know that the rarities and high numbers are the highlights of the day. So let's start with the high numbers. We had quite a few species that had over 30 plus individuals Just like this black-whiskered vireo, it was surprising to see this many individuals at that time in early May, usually because they come in late April. And to see 30 plus and hear 30 plus in old growth coppice forests starting to pair up and beginning to breed, it was great to see. An unusual sighting would be the semi-palmated plovers. Lino mentioned that they had a few up north, but we got a large group down south. And to get 30 plus individuals this late in the season when they should be going back north, it was quite abnormal, but it was a welcome sight. But the most significant find by far had to be the olive-capped warblers. So in the short time that we spent in the pine forest, in the Avaco pine forest, we were able to tally up 30 plus individuals. And that's not all. We were able to get 2 confirmed olive-capped warbler nests. So you can see here, you can see in this photo, it looks like this olive-capped warbler has a tasty treat to feed to the chicks. And it's just it's a welcome sight to see after Dorian. We also have rare species like this hermit thrush that we were able to record through nocturnal flight call recording, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And one species that we completely missed out on, which was super surprising, is the Bahama yellowthroat. Any given day, I can go down to Abaco National Park and find this species, and I am not sure how it eluded us because they are found even after Dorian in North and South Abaco. So this species it really eluded us, but we'll get them next time. So how are the populations of these local species doing? Well, if we take a look at the graph here, the graph represents important species and number of individuals cited on 10-point counts within Abaco National Park. The methodology for both data sets is 13-minute point counts at each location with 2 observers. The 2020 point count data is worth mentioning because it was done in January of 2020, just a few months after Dorian. And it was done by BNT and the American Bird Conservancy. And I was happy to tag along and work with some great colleagues from both organizations to collect this data. But if we compare these two, the 2021 data was actually taken in May. So it might mean that the birds are more active and easier to be detected due to breeding. So they might be out more often than that. But what I like to think is that after the 2021 January point counts, I think that these birds had a very successful breeding season. And if we just look here, we can see that the trends are going upwards, and we can see that the populations are booming. And like I said, it could be due to breeding, but I really think that more birds are finding a sense of normalcy after Dorian. So NFC was utilized to record additional species for Global Big Day. And the big question that I'm sure all of you have is, what's an NFC? So an NFC is a nocturnal flight call monitoring station with the purpose of detecting many migratory species that use flight calls during their nightly migrations. The calls are taken through a recording device, and then they can be analyzed as spectrograms to determine the ID of that bird. If we take a look at this picture here from Hal Mitchell, this is his setup, and it's pretty much a top tier setup that he has here. He has a recorder at the top of an aluminum pole, so it makes the birds a little bit easier to detect as they're flying over in the night. But then there's my setup. So this is a basic setup, and anybody can do this. Even if you don't have a sound recorder like mine, like a H4n Pro, you can use your iPhone to get NFC calls. So basically all my setup is I plug in my sound recorder to my battery source to run it all night, stand them up within a cup just to ensure that it doesn't fall, place those within a 5-gallon bucket, and secure it with some soundproofing just to dampen out a few sounds like wind and rain, and then throw a rain shield, which in my case is a garbage bag, over the top of it. And I find that I have great quality in my NFC calls to be able to analyze them. So you might be asking, well, okay, you have all this data, but how are you able to narrow it down to try and figure out which bird it is? And if you're well versed in bird identification by ear, you're able to tell instantly without even seeing the bird, which family the bird is in. So I might not have known that this was a spotted sandpiper when I was first analyzing the spectrograph here, but upon myself listening to it, I was able to determine, okay, it's definitely a sandpiper. And I thought within myself, I said, okay, it's early May. Most of the sandpipers have left. So what would be the common guess? And I said, okay, spotted sandpiper. So I went to my first online resource that I tend to utilize quite a bit, which is Xenocanto. Xenocanto is a large library full of bird sounds, which anybody throughout the world can access. And I went on Xenocanto and I started to type in spotted sandpiper. I looked through and I said, okay, I see a nocturnal flight call for a spotted sandpiper here by Manuel Groslet. So I was able to pull up his spectrograph and I was able to analyze them side by side to try and figure out, okay, is this the species I saw? And I was able to make a positive ID on this species by looking and seeing that both of them were within the 4,000 to 5,000 hertz range, and they had the same inclination in the call. So I was able to get a positive ID on this. Another resource that I really enjoy using is Flight Calls of Migratory Birds, specifically the North American land birds by Bill Evans. This is a go-to resource for me any given day of the week. In-depth descriptions of all of these North American land birds. So here's a few of the species that I've been able to record. So the two on the left, the barn owl and the limpkin, I've been able to record pretty much on any given night, as these birds are resident and they are primarily nocturnal. So it's no surprise there that I'd be able to get a few of those. But these four on the right are very interesting as they're all migratory birds. The indigo bunting and the spotted sandpiper are winter residents, but the birds like the hermit thrush and the veery, these were transient birds and they were just moving through. So it was really great to have these birds all within a week apart. And as Lino mentioned, it's very important to us that we use the NFC to gain new species, but it's also equally as important to have people on the ground, and that's where the Bnt Certified Eco Guides come in. So here they are. Here's the 2021 Bnt Certified Eco Guides, and there I am right in the middle being certified as well. So we had about 15 participants from 3 islands, all of which I think have a better appreciation for their environment. And to have a few of these guys tag along on a global big day event, I think it really helped them to be a steward of their environment, especially when it comes to birds and learning more about birds.
And now you've seen this presentation and you've seen Chris's enthusiasm. You've seen some of the amazing birds that we've found, and you want to get involved. You want to participate or contribute to a global big day event or a similar event like that. The first thing I want to tell you is anyone can be a birder, right? All it takes is for you to be observant, and you can look at birds, you can listen out for birds, you can even identify birds sometimes by the other activities that they do. But I'd encourage all of you to just reach out and find your local bird club. Chris has just started the Abaco Bird Club, the Bird Club of Abaco. And we have the Bird Club of New Providence here on New Providence Island where I am today. But you can make donations to these other organizations that are also supporting this bird work and bird conservation. The Bahamas National Trust, of course, we just said they certified a bunch of guides, not just in Abaco, but around the Bahamas. BirdsCaribbean has been doing similar work throughout the Caribbean. And if you're in Abaco right now, we left guides and binoculars in Abaco with friends of the environment, so they can support your dreams of being the next great birder on Avaco Island. And definitely you can reach out to either Chris or myself as well. On the left-hand side, you can see me leading a couple tourists on Blue Lagoon Island. And the Blue Lagoon Island leadership and staff, they've been super supportive of engaging more in environmental education. And they've always done that really at Blue Lagoon Island and Dolphin Encounters, but integrating that into part of their work has been really interesting. And on the right-hand side, you can see Chris and his friend Elijah, who takes so many awesome photos that you can see online all over the place now. But definitely follow either of us and reach out if you want more information, or if you want to take a kind of easy entry into bird watching and just getting out into the wilderness. And definitely make your donations earmarked for bird conservation or capacity building in the Bahamas, for us to make sure that they know that you engage with the environment and you're interested in helping us do this great work. Thank you all for joining us on this presentation, and a special thank you to everyone who participated on Global Big Day in the Bahamas and around the world. But a special thank you to these organizations listed here who contributed in kind or directly to help us get this off the ground. And thanks again, especially to BirdsCaribbean for hosting us today so that we can share our enthusiasm with you.
So like Lino said, thank you very much for attending this presentation. We'll be taking some questions right now. And here are our social media tags. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Bahama Birder, and Dr. Davis at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Sci Perspective. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris and Lino. That was so interesting to hear your story of how you managed to pull off a global big day. And I think you did get the raw end of the deal, Lino, being on the north side. You'll have to trade up with Chris next year. But anyway,
for me, bird watching, for me, I'm out there just looking and enjoying it wherever I am.
I'm just teasing you. Yeah. You know, you enjoy and you are enthusiastic about whatever you see. And it was interesting and of course important that you cover all of Abaco, so you could look at the differences between the north and the south. So yeah, everybody, I encourage you to put any questions that you have for Chris or Lino in the Q&A panel, and we'll get to them. Same on Facebook. Let us know if you have questions. All right, so Aaliyah is asking, are there restoration plans by the government or other organizations for Abaco? So what is happening right now with restoration of habitats?
So there is definitely a lot of work going on Abaco, but primarily right now, we're trying to get the economy and the communities back up, where there's the Water and Sewage Corporation, Bahamas Electricity Company, well, BPL now, as well as our other infrastructure. We're trying to make sure that people have what they need to survive and move back into Abaco. A lot of people, a lot of humans are still displaced, as well as the animals. But on Abaco, we do have a forestry reserve now that's under the authority of the Forestry Department. And so that's really cool. It's a new type of conservation situation over there. And that is also part of the Queen's Commonwealth Forest, I think, which gives it a special level of protection that we haven't been using in the past much in the Bahamas. And so that's really exciting. And so those areas will be not only protected, but also managed in a way that it might see more interaction with people and understanding of the value of those environments. So there's a lot of work going on, but I think it's going to be slow. So that it's kind of, it is what it is, but we're hopeful.
Yep. All right. And can you compare the diversity of birds that you saw in 19, 20, and 21 with prior to Dorian? Have you had a chance to look at that yet? And was the number much lower in the north than normal, which I would expect it was? The diversity in numbers were much lower, but have you had a chance to look at those data yet?
Yeah, well, Chris, how long have you been birding in Abaco?
Quite a number of years. Actually, there was the baseline that we took to do the BNT surveys was from a study that's Stedman and Franklin did, and we used the same methodology for our point counts um, in South Abaco and North Abaco. I haven't got around to checking eBird data yet for Global Big Day for the North Abaco, Central Abaco, and South Abaco, but I believe that the numbers this year were significantly better than the Christmas bird count of 2019. So that's something to be happy about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I think so. I first went to Abaco back in 2003 on the Abaco Parrot project with now Dr. Caroline Sahala. And working on that, I literally used to be in the forest for like 8 hours a day. I remember those rainstorms that would just like pop up and drench you, and then you're just like walking around in the forest. But the birds in the forest down in South Abaco, and I was able to go and hang out there a couple times this year. They don't seem to have changed. They seem just as happy as ever. But going up north, it was a totally different story. But there's a balance to nature. And on the one hand, I didn't see many of the little birds, banana quits, the woodpeckers, other forest species, but things like the hawks. I've never seen so many red-tailed hawks ever in my life. And they're just now everything's open so they can see what they need to hunt. And that's really interesting to see how the habitat shifts. It's not that there's no habitat there. The habitat is just different from what it was before. And so now the species are going to find their new balance.
Yeah. Good observation. All right, so Maya Wilson, who used to study Bahama swallows, naturally she's interested. She said, great presentation, thank you both. Do you have a sense of how the Bahama swallows are doing on Abaco?
Yes, we actually do. It's I think it was about 2 weeks ago I found a Bahama swallow nest within Abaco National Park in a snag of a dead Caribbean yellow pine, which is pretty abnormal. But they actually like to use the cell phone towers. And yeah, they're doing pretty well. We've been having some pretty high counts, and I believe we were able to see them both in North and South Abaco.
Yeah, and so while I was there, anytime you go out to Marsh Harbor, like they were just there, like every day, like clockwork. And so it's just really nice to see them just hanging out, doing their thing. I think for the most part, they don't notice much of what we're stressing out about. And I think they were fine.
Okay. All right, another question. Which birds were actually missing that you may be concerned about or what you didn't see? You didn't see the yellow throat, but you're not really worried about that. That was just kind of a missed species. But it's not like Grand Bahama where you're missing like the olive capped and the Bahama Warbler, right? That's missing from Grand Bahama story.
Bahama Nuthatch.
Nuthatch, yes.
The thing is, I think the Bahama yellowthroat like just really took the day off on Global Day. He was like, you know what? I don't want to see Lino and Chris today. But I think generally, I don't really worry about many species. But like you said, the Bahama Nuthatch in Grand Bahama, that's a species that was already, it was on the ropes. And then we have these climate powered storms and stuff like that, that it can be a real big issue, especially when we don't have enough contiguous habitat, or we have additional issues, pollution and stuff like that. So, and like the Avaco parrot, when you look at the devastation of the pine forest north of the Neem farm, if that storm had been at that strength before it came into the Abaco National Park, I think it would have been a really different story for Abaco parrots. And this is something that we have to really talk about now. How do we make sure that there's enough habitat throughout Abaco so that these birds would be safe? Because God forbid, if the next storm takes out the southern pine forest, then that would really be a curtain call for that amazing species that's really iconic for Abaco Island.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, seeing, some of the devastation on Abaco, and then of course knowing about Grand Bahama, how badly that was hit and how they're not seeing several species there. It certainly is, wake up call that these hurricanes can wipe out these single island endemics for sure. So somebody's asking, is it possible that some of the North Birds migrated or moved to the south? Do you think that's what happened? And with the poor habitat, they would have just moved in from the north to the south in the last couple of years?
I think for sure. Birds move around all the time, and we can't really control them. Birds don't understand borders, barriers, fences, your geopolitical status, nothing like that. And so they go where they need to go to find their resources. But I think our job is just to make sure that we're not making it too difficult for them to find those resources that they need.
Yep, they're going to move into the better quality habitat if they can, if they weren't.
And definitely the Avaco parrots, they use the pine forest for nesting, and they also get out into the neighboring areas. And they do have some human conflict when they eat the mangoes and fruits off of people trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good for them. Somebody commented, Lorraine, my 100th bird identified pre-Dorian with the barn owl, and I'm thrilled to know our local bird survived and had a mate in its known nest area. So,
Definitely.
good comment. Congratulations for such excellent work. It is impressive the high number of species after the hurricane. How many years do you expect the pine forest will take to recover? And are you seeing some signs of recovery?
Okay, so yes, we're seeing signs of recovery, little pine trees, but since Hurricane Dorian, they're only like 6 to 8 inches tall. Mm-hmm. And the way pine trees are, they encourage the fires to burn out quickly below them and clear out the understory so that their babies can come up. But now you have love vine and other trees growing in there. So if a fire goes through, it's going to really burn those baby pine trees pretty badly. And these trees that were there, they were 40, 50 years old. So for us to get back to that extent, it's no time soon.
Yep. Yep. All right. And another comment from Lorraine. She said, thank you for sharing your efforts from Global Big Day. As a Hurricane Dorian survivor from Elbow Key, I'm greatly encouraged. So that's good news. I know that some of the initial counts, Christmas bird counts and so forth, right after Dorian were pretty bleak. Everything was just in horrible shape. So it's definitely encouraging to see the high number of species that you guys found and so forth. So really, really good for you to be documenting that. Tara is asking, the images of birds from north and south shown during the presentation, are those the actual photos taken on the day of the visit? Or was
a few of them were taken on the day of the visit. But for the sake of the presentation, everybody likes to look at good pictures of birds. So I just figured I'd include some of my previous photos, but they have been taken on my trip to Abaco, which has been around within the past 4 months.
Excellent. Yeah, wonderful photos, Chris.
Thank you.
You got to follow Chris Bahama Birder. And speaking of social media, Emma asks, she's our Twitter guru and helps us out a lot with social media. Emma Lewis, she's on our board. She says, and Chris, why aren't you on Twitter? That's her favorite.
Yes, Chris, why aren't you on Twitter?
That's a very good question. I think I just resonate more towards Facebook and Instagram. I don't like Twitter's landscape and how the UI is. So I'm not a big fan of that. But Instagram and Facebook, they make it pretty easy to upload and get some photos out to a large audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris's work is really very visual. So I think he kind of bends to his audience and forces himself to write about the birds after he takes these gorgeous photos. But his photography is just amazing. And when you see him walking through the forest with this big cannon on his shoulder, it looks like a bazooka. But he's taking some amazing photos, all the birds' eyelashes and stuff you can see.
Thank you.
All right, another question for you. Any estimates on what proportion of the pine forest was destroyed by Dorian?
Ooh.
Also mangroves, if you have any, even just a guesstimate at this point, like how much habitat was destroyed, how much is still in good shape? Like the South is in pretty good shape, right?
Yeah, it was virtually unaffected.
Yeah.
Maybe a few down limbs, but up north, when we're talking about mangroves loss, there's significant damage and there's no signs of recovery, especially with Sunset Ridge, like Lino talked about. There's no signs of recovery down in those mangroves. So I think it needs to be an effort placed on whether that be NGOs or the government to try and plant some more mangrove propagules there and get it back up and going.
Yeah, and that's really a tough, it's a tough thing to say. But like when we went down there immediately after Hurricane Dorian, it really looked like God had basically put his hand on the island and just swept northward. And all the trees, these were pine trees that, they were 30, 40 years old, but they were just like folded in half. Or there's the hood from a car that's actually wrapped around one of the pine trees. And so when you think about the intensity of a storm like that, it's really wild. But then returning there a year later, and I kind of take things as they come now, and there's lots of the understory trees, particularly native Bahamian fruit trees like wild guava. They were everywhere. And so all of these frugivorous birds, they were just piling on it. And that's the interesting thing, that when you lose something, something else will come in to fill its space. And I'm just glad that what replaced the pine trees wasn't a bunch of invasive species. We have good intact forests that could replenish itself, although the pines will take a long time. We have other native trees that are getting in there.
That's great. Yeah, that speaks a little bit to Joseph Prosper from Antigua's questions. What are the birds eating?
Yeah.
Do you have any more comments on that?
But I did see a lot of insect activity, and some of the areas that I went into before Global Big Day, the birds are eating what they always eat. They're flying around and grabbing little bugs that you didn't see until you saw them pecking away at it. Around the area of the Friends of the Environment building, you could hear limpkins all night with their horrible song. But they seem to be really, really happy with whatever they're doing and eating there. And then you can hear the screams of the frogs at night when the herons get them. And that's not the best thing to hear while you're trying to sleep, but you know that life goes on. And so I feel pretty hopeful about it.
That's good news. What about the hummingbirds? Are they getting enough to eat? The hummingbirds and banana quits, the flowers have come back, there's nectar. I know they also eat insects, but.
Oh, Cuban emeralds for sure. The Cuban emeralds population is, especially in South Abaco, even though it was unaffected, pretty much down there, their population is doing just fine, as well as the Bahama wood stars.
Good to hear. Okay, question from Facebook, Bridget Davis. Chris, I love the idea of making my own NFC. Can you say more about it? Where would you place it? In a high location, open field?
Oh, definitely. So The purpose of the NFC, you know, you're going to be getting some nocturnal flight calls, and the birds tend to migrate quite high in the sky at night. So if you can get it on top of your roof, that would be excellent. But I have mine just on a patio or sitting down on the lawn sometimes, and I'm still able to get really good quality NFC. Like I said during that slide, you can reach out to me. Like I said, I'm on Instagram or Facebook at Bahama Birder, and you can just reach out to me, and I can give you all kinds of resources to help you begin with your NFCs.
That's fantastic. Maybe you could do a book article for us, and then, you know, share that, and lots of people will get out there. And I'm going to share another link to a resource. There's other apps out there that will identify bird sounds, but there's one by Cornell, BirdNet, which is, I think it's rated most highly as far as accuracy of identifying the correct bird. You can check out some other ones that are available, but you can just record with your iPhone if you're out boarding and you hear a bird you don't know what it is, and upload it to the website, and it will tell you, you know, with really high accuracy what that bird likely is. So it's a fantastic resource for learning to bird by ear, and also to figuring out new birds that you don't know. So check that out.
I have to say that Chris actually introduced me to the NFC when we were doing some surveys for other work. And it's amazing the birds that decide that they don't want to be seen, but they don't mind performing at night. And then the time that Chris puts in and dedicates to this, like going through this 8-hour recording, and I'm like, wow, dude, that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I'm really excited to work with Chris on projects like this and see the new generation of birders and how we're using technology and all of this stuff to get much better data, and a lot of really interesting data too.
Great. All right. And Barbara Carroll is asking, what can you tell us about the Bird Club of Abaco?
So the Bird Club of Abaco was just founded about 2 weeks ago. And we are going to be going out to Bahama Palm Shores. If you're on Abaco, please feel free to come out to Bahama Palm Shores North on the 19th of June. That's a Saturday at 8 a.m. We're going to have a great time, possibly see some parrots, some West India woodpeckers, some spindalis. So if you're able to tag along and come out and join the club, by all means, please.
That's great. It's so exciting that you formed a local bird club. It's such a great way to get people into the fun and joy of birding. And we were really excited that Chris and Lena formed their Avaco Birders Global Big Day group. We actually had 15 teams for Global Big Day, and we had 10 national teams or 10 island teams. So it was a lot of fun because everybody, we have in that blog article that I just shared in the chat, the stats for all the different teams, how many species they saw, you know, how many checklists, things like that. So it was a lot of fun to make it a little bit competitive and see what everybody saw, and everybody did great. You know, we had big teams, we had small teams, so everybody excelled and did really well. And then it was also a fundraiser for Caribbean MODIS to get MODIS wildlife tracking into the Bahamas and other countries. So we are working on that as well. So it was all for a good cause.
And I want to remind everyone that Global Big Day is, you know, it's worldwide and everyone's doing it at the same time, but anyone can do a big day any day. And I regularly do it just randomly because I'm bored or because I just feel like there's an empty space in the data set that I want to fill up. And that's a big part of what makes it so important to me. Historically, the bird data that's collected in the Bahamas and the Caribbean is collected by foreign scientists who have a very small amount of time that they can spend in our country collecting data on our species. And they often do it at times that are of interest to them for migratory birds that are from North America or federally listed or endangered species. But I want to know what the limpkins are doing. I want to know what the yellow-crowned night herons are doing, our amazing endemic species. And so I can get out every day down here And perhaps there's a foreign researcher that wants to collaborate with you down here. And if you have that enthusiasm, just get out and go and look at some birds. You can do it any day of the week. You can do it during your lunch break. You can do it in the morning, the evening. Just go. And as Chris showed us, you can even listen to birds at night. So definitely there's no holds barred. Let's go and get this bird data.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you can bird anytime, anywhere. And it's really great to use eBird Mobile, because then you can keep your life list. You can find hotspots, where to go birding. If you're looking for a certain bird that you've never seen, you can figure out where to see it. So getting online and using eBird is really great. And definitely, if you're in the islands, use BirdsCaribbean, and make sure you choose the Caribbean as your portal, so that it will bring up the birds that occur in the region or on your island. All right, I think we're almost ready to wrap up. There's a question that I missed here from Paul. He said, I might have missed it, but of the total number of endemics in the Bahamas, how many can be found on Abaco?
So the total number of endemics that can be found on Avaco is 4, if you're still going to count the Bahama Woodstar, even though, like I mentioned, it's not a true Bahamian endemic anymore. It can also be found in Turks and Caicos. It is a archipelagic endemic.
Excellent.
But that's just what the data says now. Maybe you go there and you find us another endemic species.
Okay, and one more question that I missed in the chat. Does the Bird Club of New Providence have a social media presence, and can anyone get involved?
Anyone can get involved. You can reach out to me and I'll make sure that you get connected. I can't confirm exactly what their connectivity is on social media right now, but I know that they do have an email list that they will let you know when they're going out again, where they're going to meet. And they meet, I think, every month.
There is a social media presence. There is no Instagram or Twitter, but they are on Facebook at Bird Club New Providence. So if you go on there, and should be able to find them and reach out.
Excellent. All right, and Emma had to run, but I think she had some last comment to you, Chris. Nope, you should definitely be on Twitter. You're missing out. We're missing you. So you'll have to reconsider.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks again to you both. That was really interesting and really great to hear how things are going on Abaco, that recovery is happening, that the birds are coming back, and very encouraging news. And we look forward to you guys hopefully doing this again next year, and reporting back to us again on how the birds are doing.
Yeah, maybe we do another island. Maybe we do the whole country next year.
Yeah, I would. I hope so. Yeah.
If anyone has a plane that you can lend us,
you just need to motivate local teams on each island, and we just want everybody to be participating. So lots of nice comments, very interesting. Thank you, good job. Thanks to all the speakers for this great presentation, all the attendees. So thanks again for being with us today and sharing your experiences and knowledge with us. We really enjoyed it, and we'll be staying in touch. So follow Sci Perspective and Bahama Birder and BirdsCaribbean on social media, and stay in touch.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Happy birding.
Happy birding.